Anger Management, Season 4, Episode 3. Charlie and the Re-Virginized. Detailed summary ***. The third episode of Season 4 of Anger Management continues the chaotic and frequently inappropriate life of Charlie Goodson, a former professional baseball player whose career ended because of his anger problems and who later became an anger management therapist. Charlie's professional life is built around helping other people understand their emotions. But his own personal behavior continues to create situations that are almost impossible to manage. In this episode, Charlie becomes involved in an unusual situation surrounding sex, relationships, guilt, and personal boundaries when a woman from his past returns to his life with a very different attitude toward their previous relationship. The story uses Charlie's familiar combination of confidence, sarcasm, and emotional avoidance to explore what happens when someone attempts to change the meaning of a past relationship after the relationship has already happened. At the same time, Charlie's friends and patients provide the usual mixture of bad advice, questionable logic, and brutally honest observations that make his therapy group such an important part of the series. The episode begins with Charlie continuing to settle into the latest stage of his professional and personal life. Although he has recently been forced to confront some of his reckless behavior, Charlie remains convinced that he is capable of handling complicated situations better than everyone around him. His confidence is one of his greatest strengths as a therapist, but it is also one of his greatest weaknesses as a person. Charlie has an extraordinary ability to analyze other people's motivations, yet he frequently becomes defensive when anyone applies the same analysis to him. His patients know this better than anyone, and their willingness to challenge him creates much of the episode's comedy. Charlie's therapy group continues to function as a strange combination of professional treatment and informal friendship. The members know one another's problems, habits, and insecurities, and they have become comfortable enough to criticize each other openly. Charlie often tries to maintain the authority of the therapist, but the group has learned that they can turn his own therapeutic techniques against him whenever he becomes hypocritical. Their conversations are therefore filled with arguments about relationships, sex, jealousy, commitment, and emotional responsibility. Charlie's own situation soon becomes the most interesting topic of discussion. A woman from his past reappears, bringing with her a completely different perspective on what happened between them. Charlie initially assumes that the situation will be simple. He sees himself as someone who understands relationships and believes he can easily explain what the woman is feeling. However, it quickly becomes apparent that she is not approaching their shared history in the way Charlie expected. Her attitude toward their previous sexual relationship has changed, and she now wants to redefine what that experience means to her. This creates an uncomfortable situation because Charlie tends to view sex and relationships in practical terms. He has traditionally separated physical intimacy from emotional commitment, often convincing himself that casual relationships are easier because they do not require vulnerability. The woman's new perspective challenges that philosophy. She is attempting to reclaim a sense of control over her own identity and choices, while Charlie is forced to confront the fact that two people can remember the same relationship in completely different ways. The idea of becoming re-virginized is deliberately absurd and comedic, but beneath the joke is a serious question about personal identity. The episode plays with the idea that a person can symbolically redefine an experience that they regret or no longer want to identify with. Charlie initially has difficulty understanding this because he tends to view the past as something that cannot be changed. From his perspective, once something has happened, it happened. He therefore sees the woman's attempt to redefine her sexual history as irrational. His friends and patients, however, point out that emotional meaning is not always governed by simple logic. People can change how they understand past experiences even when they cannot physically change what happened. Charlie's reaction reveals one of his recurring weaknesses. He often assumes that his interpretation of a situation is automatically the correct one. He has spent years developing a confident personality, and that confidence allows him to function effectively as a therapist. However, it also makes him dismissive when other people have perspectives that conflict with his own. His patients challenge him by explaining that the woman's feelings are not necessarily about Charlie personally. They may be about her own desire to regain control over her life and establish a new sense of self. Charlie struggles with this explanation because he is accustomed to being at the center of romantic situations. He initially interprets the woman's behavior as a reaction to him, but the more he learns, the more he realizes that her motivations are largely about herself. This becomes an uncomfortable lesson for Charlie. He has always enjoyed believing that women remain emotionally affected by him, even after relationships end. The possibility that someone might redefine a past relationship without centering Charlie forces him to reconsider his own importance in other people's lives. His ego naturally resists this idea. Charlie responds with sarcasm and humor, trying to make the situation seem ridiculous rather than acknowledging that it makes him uncomfortable. His friends quickly recognize the defense mechanism. They point out that Charlie's jokes are often a way of avoiding emotional conversations. If he can make everyone laugh, he does not have to admit that he is confused or hurt. This is one of the recurring themes of the series. Charlie's humor is both his greatest social strength and his most effective emotional shield. While Charlie deals with the unusual woman from his past, his therapy group continues discussing relationships. The patients offer conflicting opinions about whether Charlie should become involved in the situation. Some believe he should respect the woman's decision and move on. Others think Charlie should try to understand why she feels the need to redefine the past. Charlie, naturally, wants advice that supports his own interpretation, and he becomes frustrated whenever the group refuses to agree with him. Their disagreement creates a comedic argument in which everyone attempts to diagnose everyone else. Charlie reminds them that they are supposed to be his patients, not his therapists, but they respond that he is clearly the one who needs help in this particular situation. This reversal is typical of anger management. The people who come to Charlie for treatment often end up exposing his own emotional weaknesses. His patients understand that his expertise does not make him immune to the same problems they experience. In fact, Charlie sometimes seems more emotionally confused than the people he is supposed to be helping. The episode also explores Charlie's complicated relationship with intimacy. He prefers relationships that allow him to maintain control. Casual sex is attractive to him because it reduces the risk of emotional vulnerability. When another person begins attaching deeper meaning to a relationship, Charlie often becomes uncomfortable. He would rather maintain clear boundaries than confront the possibility that he might genuinely care about someone. The woman's desire to redefine their past therefore creates an interesting challenge. Charlie is accustomed to believing that he controls the emotional terms of his relationships. Now someone else is changing those terms without asking his permission. He cannot stop her from deciding what the experience means to her, and that loss of control frustrates him. His first reaction is to argue, but eventually he begins to understand that he has no right to dictate another person's interpretation of her own life. This realization is important because Charlie's professional philosophy is built around the idea that people must take responsibility for their own emotions. Yet he sometimes forgets that this principle applies to everyone, including people whose decisions he does not understand. The episode therefore gives Charlie another opportunity to practice the lessons he teaches his patients. If he believes that people are responsible for their own emotional lives, he must accept that the woman has the right to redefine her relationship with her past. Charlie may find her decision strange, but he does not get to control it. His struggle to accept this creates both comedy and character development. The situation also becomes an opportunity for Charlie's friends to examine their own attitudes towards sex and relationships. The characters frequently disagree about whether sexual experiences should be treated as casual, meaningful, or somewhere in between. Their different opinions reflect the broader theme of the show. There is no single formula for managing relationships. What works for Charlie may not work for someone else, and what seems irrational to one person may be emotionally necessary for another. Charlie's former wife, Jennifer, remains an important source of perspective as well. Jennifer knows Charlie's personality extremely well and is rarely impressed by his attempts to manipulate situations. She understands that Charlie often becomes more interested in a woman when he senses that he might lose access to her. His ego responds to rejection by becoming more determined, which can lead him to confuse attraction with emotional attachment. Jennifer's comments force Charlie to question whether he genuinely cares about the woman or simply dislikes losing control of the situation. This is an uncomfortable distinction for him. Charlie wants to believe that his intentions are noble, But Jennifer points out that his behavior may be driven by his ego. Her ability to see through him is one of the reasons their relationship remains complicated even after their divorce. They have known each other long enough that Charlie cannot easily hide behind his usual charm. At the same time, Charlie's relationship with his children provides another reminder that his behavior has consequences beyond his romantic life. He wants to be a good father, and his children often see through his exaggerated confidence. Charlie can joke about almost anything, but being a father requires him to demonstrate responsibility. His romantic behavior sometimes conflicts with the example he wants to set for his family. This creates another layer of irony because Charlie spends his professional life teaching emotional responsibility while his personal life remains messy. The episode does not treat this contradiction as a moral disaster. Instead, it uses it as a source of comedy while allowing Charlie to recognize that he is not always as emotionally sophisticated as he thinks. The therapy sessions become particularly entertaining because Charlie's patients begin using therapeutic language against him. They point out that he is rationalizing his behavior, avoiding vulnerability, and attempting to control another person's emotional choices. Charlie objects that they are misusing concepts they learned from him, but their arguments are often accurate. This is one of the strongest comedic dynamics in the series. Charlie creates a group of people capable of challenging him, and then becomes annoyed when they actually do it. The patient's willingness to confront him also demonstrates how much they have grown. Earlier in the series, they may have depended heavily on Charlie for answers. Now they are increasingly capable of questioning him and developing their own interpretations. Their progress sometimes comes at Charlie's expense, but that is part of what makes the group effective. They are not simply passive recipients of therapy. They have learned to think critically about their own behavior and the behavior of the people around them. Charlie eventually realizes that his obsession with the woman's decision is becoming unnecessary. He cannot change her mind, and continuing to argue about the meaning of their past relationship will not improve either person's life. The more mature response is to accept that she has the right to define her own experience. Charlie may still think the concept of being re-virginized is ridiculous, but he begins to separate his personal opinion from his responsibility to respect someone else's choices. This distinction represents a small but meaningful piece of growth for him. He does not need to agree with someone in order to respect them. That lesson is particularly relevant for Charlie because his professional work requires him to deal with people whose emotional reactions often seem irrational to him. Therapy is not about proving that one person is correct. It is about helping people understand why they behave the way they do and giving them the tools to make healthier decisions. Charlie's experience in this episode reminds him of that principle. He may not fully understand the woman's desire to redefine her past, but he can understand that the desire comes from a need for control, identity, and emotional closure. Once he recognizes this, the situation becomes less threatening. He no longer has to treat her decision as an attack on him. Instead,